Beat interview. Joining me today is James Brockman, Executive Curator of the American Defenders of the Baton and Corregidor Museum, Education and Research Center. Thank you for joining me, Mr. Brockman. It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. Can you tell us a little bit about Baton and Corregidor and those who have fought in that Pacific arena?
Back in 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. They also bombed the Philippines. And it's the greatest defeat in military history. It's the largest defeat in military history. And both Corregidor, Bataan fell on April 9th, and Corregidor fell on May 6th of 1942. The Bataan Death March started on April 9th, but the Corregidor fought on until May 6th, when Wainwright and King surrendered all their troops.
I think the one thing that comes to people's minds when they hear Bataan is the Bataan Death March. Many people know that the Death March occurred, but don't know much about it. Are you able to elaborate on that for us?
Sure. 66,000 men were marched approximately 66 miles up the Bataan Peninsula with no food, no water. If they fell down, they were bayoneted, or their heads were chopped off. Or they were just buried alive. We have record of that. The Japanese did this because they wanted to. They did not understand how many people they had to deal with. The 66,000, 12,000 to 20,000 were Americans, and the Japanese, after the third day, said to the Filipinos who were on the march, "Go home," and they went home. The Americans stayed on the death march. They went from Malvez to a place called Baton and Camp O'Donnell, two of the worst camps in the history of mankind. They suffered immensely on the death march, and like I said, if they even went for water or they went for food, the Japanese either shot them or they were bayoneted, or the Filipinos that were trying to give them food and water were dealt the same punishment. So out of the 12,000 or so men that were on from the American side, approximately 700 to 1,000 men died on the death march. More died in the prison camps than on the hell ships.
When I visited the center earlier in September, you told me about a pair of shorts from a prisoner of war. The shorts wouldn't even fit a 5-year-old. They were so small. Can you share with us a little bit about the starvation that the POWs went through?
Yeah, in January 6, 1942, MacArthur said to his troops, cut the rations in half. And the average man takes in 2,500 calories. He cut that down to less than 1,200. The average woman takes in around 2,000 calories a day. They cut that down to 1,000 for the women. So they were already starting to become emaciated before the death march even started, and they had lost weight. By the time they got to whatever camp they were at, like Baton or O'Donnell, the food that they were being served was not healthy food. It was rice. There's no nutritional value in rice. We know this. We're writing a paper on this nutritional value of rice. And so they didn't get the nutrition that they were supposed to have and the calorie count that they were supposed to have on a daily basis. So average person weighed 120 pounds. By the time they were liberated, they weighed 60 pounds or less. Some of them couldn't even move. One of our board members' father, Joe Vaughter, was on a hell ship and went to Manchuria. He weighed 230 pounds when he started. When he got liberated, he weighed less than 160 pounds. And so this was common throughout the whole thing. And besides dysentery and beriberi and a few other diseases compounding this, the death rate was very high in the prison camps. And this is because of the fact they weren't getting nourishment and no food at all.
It's truly awe-inspiring what these men went through.
Yeah.
I appreciate the respect and dedication you and the staff at the center have for this cause. You also have artifacts in your museum that cannot be found anywhere else in the world. Among them, a regiment flag that flew over the Philippines that is the last of its kind. Mr. Brockman, how do you acquire these artifacts?
It's kind of, I mean, you speak of the flag, that's a High Commissioner's flag from from the Philippines that flew from 1936 to 1942. It was found down in Pensacola, Florida, and a guy at an estate sale bought it. And he tried to sell it in a flea market. And a flag guy I know down there, he called me and says, I think I have the regimental flag for Philippine Scouts. And he sent me a picture of it. And I said, no, that's not it. But I'll take the flag because it's a High Commissioner's flag. It's the only one like it. And we found out that, so they call us and they say, I have this stuff, can I send it to you and stuff like that. We get stuff in almost every day from local people here in the Northern Panhandle to people from all over the world. And we're working on gaining more artifacts once these descendants clean out the houses with all their memorabilia that they have and artifacts they have. But I'll get a call and somebody will say, I have this regimental flag, or I have this bayonet, or I have some art. I have, for instance, we have Hitler's silverware from a house in Munich. And we got that because the guy next door, he passed away, and his son came over and says, do you want it? And we said, sure.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You mentioned when I saw you last that your collection in regards to the Baton and Corregidor is the second largest next to the National Archives, and you have more arriving at your museum constantly. What current projects are you working on?
We're working on a number of projects. We worked with the Department of Defense on a DPA, a recovery of bodies based on the artifacts we have in the collection. We have 1.5 million pages, and so, for instance, they came up and looked through them to find conversations that were going on between POWs to maybe find where these men are still buried. We just had a Japanese journalist in here. She's doing a study on Mukden prison camp in Manchuria. So we worked with her in getting photographs and texts, and we had one artifact that nobody else has. It's a declassified government document on what happened in Mukden, and so we showed her that, and she was very pleased with that. We're working with authors on manuscripts and making sure the accuracy of the manuscript is correct. We've done that for a couple this last spring. We're working on digitizing the collection so we can go online. We have a digital lab, and we have interns from Franciscan and West Liberty putting that together right now. So it's kind of, but most of the time we help veterans out and descendants with veterans information regarding where, why, how, and stuff like that. That's pretty much what we do.
That's wonderful. I guess my last question is kind of a hard-hitting one, but why should people visit your museum?
Well, it's because it's the biggest collection of its kind outside of the National Archives devoted to Bataan and Corregidor and the Death March. Three gentlemen thought it was relevant at the time to put this collection together. Eddie Jackford from Wellsburg, Joe Vaughter from McKees Rocks, and A.B. Abraham from Renfrew, PA, up near Butler. A.B. Abraham was told to stay back with MacArthur and dig up the bodies on the Death March. So we have records of that. You won't see this anyplace else. You won't see the horror of what went on. You won't get to read the truth in what these guys wrote in their diaries. We have 1,500 diaries and documents relating to the Death March, and it's the only collection of its kind in the world that relates to the experiences they had on Death March, on Corregidor, on Bataan, fighting the Battle of the Points, and one of the best collections we have is the women of Corregidor and Bataan. They went to Santo Tomas, which was a college that's still in existence down there from 1569. It tells their story as nurses and living in these horrible conditions, and it's not well known, it's not well told. Even our government sometimes looks the other way because they know it's the greatest defeat in history. And it's something that needs to be seen, needs to be heard, needs to be said. And we try our best to do that. And hopefully will get bigger and bigger as we go on.
Thank you, Mr. Brockman. It's been
My
a
pleasure.
pleasure to have you on this Franciscan Beat interview. For those of you who would like to learn more, please locate the ADBC Center's website or their Facebook page found in the description of this video. If you would like the opportunity to connect with history and see artifacts that cannot be found anywhere else, head over to the ADBC Museum, Education, and Research Center in Wellsburg, West Virginia. This has been a Franciscan Beat interview with Mr. James Brockman, Curator of the National American Defenders of the Baton and Corregidor Museum, Education, and Research Center. Thank you for tuning in.